thinking about nature as being full of spirits, and that was the old Sami religion, basically. Because if you do think that the trees have spirits, you treat them as they are equal to you. And in the Western way of thinking, we don't. We think that nature is something below us that we can rule over. So in that way, I think my piece relates very much to a Sami way of thinking. Maybe not anymore. I shouldn't say like, oh, that's how we live now, because I don't think we do, unfortunately. Since I live in New York now, it's kind of the opposite of how you meet with people. In New York, everybody's very, hello, how are you? Very talkative. But in the end, they are not very easy to get to know. They're keeping a distance. But here it's the opposite. You can seem very unfriendly in the beginning, but then people are very friendly and very helpful and open. So it has been fantastic. I've had a lot of assistants who are doing a great work and just being very great to hang around. So I think that's really the strength of this project. All the great people who seems to enjoy helping the artists. Because the language I use can maybe feel to some a bit, I don't know, I use a pretty youth language, so I hope no one feels offended by that, because it's really not about being offensive or angry, it's just about playing with language in a very serious subject, because we've heard so many times how we need to protect the environment, and so it's very hard, I think, to say that again in a new way and make people listen. So for me, this is trying to saying it differently, and I hope that people appreciate that.
We have used these old traditional walking sticks that have been used in Sami for a long time, and they are still in use, but the older time they were like really beautifully decorated and really like your personal item that you keep with you all the time, and we thought it's very beautiful piece of tuotti, how it's like very simple and practical, but it's still like a very beautiful thing, like item.
It's called for walkers, like the people who walk beside, in front of us, or have walked before us.
We wanted to play about the idea that as in tuotti, we have always used the materials that we have. We have got them from the nature or from reindeer, but also from other cultures. So we thought that in this day we can use these very typical things that you just find around and take them as Sami tuotti. I'm interested about to show the nature there up north, that it's not any wilderness area, but it's cultural environment, that people have been living there, and it's like full of many levels, like meanings from different levels, like very practical and also some moods and stories, and you can find them there even they are not so visible. I don't like this picture from Lapland as a wilderness area. It's kind of, you can see it also in a political statement that it belongs no one, and that is not true.
In general, I'm not defining myself as an artist, morely an activist who is working through art. So for many people it can be art. For many people it can be activism. For some people it can be archivism. It can be a lot of things, but I don't. It's so hard for me to define these things. If one has to define it, so it's something about artivism, but it's also about anarchistic way of working. And if I should choose something, so there is something with so much power in performing. So that's really something where I really feel that I'm alive.
Kerran muinoin oli saamelaisia. Saamelaiset asustelivat Saamenmaan tuntureilla ja metsissä. He eivät olleet tulleet mistään. He olivat aina asuneet siellä.
So this piece is it has it's very topical. It's a kind of reaction to situation, how I see Sami people's situation, especially in Finland at the moment, and what kind of threats I see, what I'm worried about, how I feel that there is some kind of weird slide into period of state assimilation and forced assimilation, and I see that the Sami people's situation in 2016 is even much worse than 10 years ago and 20 years ago, and I think the public in Finland, I think it's a topic. It's such a marginalized topic, and with such marginalized people, that I think people are, in general, are not aware of it. And so I'm more. My piece is more like an attempt to raise awareness of a situation, current political situation, which I feel very scary and threatening the future and the existence of Sami people as people. I feel that we are the forced assimilation process is increasing when it should be going the opposite direction. Finland should try to make legislation that would protect us from assimilation, but I feel that at the moment Finland is doing the opposite. So my piece is some kind of reaction to that. In my personal art practice, I often have a kind of political starting point, and then I'm trying to work my way out of it and try to find some different dimensions, different approaches, different perspectives. I don't know how I succeed in that. I think this piece especially becomes very political, probably, but that's now at this time it's also my aim.
Tai ehkä he painuivat maan alle, tai muuttuivat metsän puiksi, tunturin kiviksi, tai ehkä he piileskelevät vielä jonkin viimeisen tunturin takana, nämä ikivanhat auringon pojat ja tyttäret.
We still are in schedule. So now I would like to give the opportunity to the audience to raise questions or comments. Who wants to start? Yes?
Hello, I'm Sanna Östman, and I'm a biologist, and I was really interested about Laura's talk because she took this tree mountain and the magic of water into your presentation. And as a biologist, I've been researching about ecological restoration, and just for your information more that in my research I tried to find projects that took an environmental artist or did this kind of ecovention or ecological artwork, and these two came up from Finland, and I researched it, and I will just briefly tell you about the scientific conclusion that I made in my thesis about these two artworks. So nowadays Tree Mountain from 1996, as you saw the nice picture from Laura, it's owned by the town of Ylöjärvi, and it's principally a conservation area, and the artwork is argued to fit well in the regionally precious rich scenery, since it has this artwork has enough of biological values. Most likely the building of the artwork has had a preventive effect on the possible ecological harm, and it has made the community take responsibility for taking care of the reclaimed environment in the long term. That was one. And about magic of waters, it succeeded. You remember the islands on the wastewater that Laura showed you. It did succeed in supplying a peaceful nesting habitat for the bird life in the area, and it has been shown that a colony of black-headed gulls is a new species nesting in the island, and that's a very important species because it protects all the other bird life in the area. And that was just a comment, and yeah.
Just to add, Okay, just to add to that, I think that because of this new species, it's also European Union conservation area, so it actually changed the magic of water. It changed the status then after this had been done. So in that sense, it was also, of course, successful from that point of view. I have a question. You said it had, about the tree mountain, that it had enough biological values. What are they?
To become a conservation area or to apply to a scenery of this kind of ridge scenery, you need certain amount of species and biological values, so that you will be. There are different categories in conservation. So to become in particular strong conservation area, you have to have. I won't go into detail what the biological values, but I can still give some more information about that. Yeah.
Hello, Colette Tron from France. Sometimes difficult to exchange only in English, but for Laura Beloff, you said some pieces are made with technological devices. I think it's very important to think the role and the place of using technology, because it's we build some artifacts, and some artifacts you put in the nature, and the nature is not the pristine. So it's a kind of maybe we can exchange or continue to think in a theoretical point of view about artifice and nature and art and device, and we can imagine that devices and art can be some artifacts, and both are artifacts. And it was very interesting. I was smiling when I saw the robot as a tourist. It's amazing. But maybe tomorrow I will talk about this kind of view on the world as a tourist.
I can just comment a little bit. I see your point in putting the devices. I know that what I also try to point at is that as we're making changes with biotechnologies, it's other kind of things going in, and maybe cannot be called devices, but other kind of organisms which are artificial. And I think those questions make it much more complex. So it's easy to say, okay, you should not maybe put robots. Oh, but I'm not sure. I mean, this is, and it's definitely an interest for me to ask this, that what kind of nature are we building, actually? Because we are the ones who are actually doing that. So, yeah, but thanks for that question. It's a good.
I've forgotten your name now. It's a question for you. We're also doing a project on circular economy and reducing the use of resources, closing the loops, and I think we have like at least one key that could be used for the future. So, but I'm curious about where the idea came from for linking the circular economy and art, and what you see of potential roles for art to play in making that circular transition.
Can you hear now? Okay, yes. Actually, the idea came from my colleague Nani, with whom I'm doing the research, and we have been playing football in the same team. And one Sunday afternoon, she came to me and asked that, would you collaborate with me? I would need you right now. I have a problem with my research, and I do not know how to continue. And maybe you can just, stir it up a little bit and add your messy working in the research, and maybe we can come up with some new ideas. And of course, he knew that I was doing artistic research, and I'm interested in artistic thinking and cyclical thinking and cyclical way of making. And she thought that if we add this art practice way of thinking and making into engineering way of thinking and making, we will get rid of the linear way of acting and thinking. So we try to bring the cycles of the art to the engineering and environmental research. Yeah, so that's...
I'd like to hear more later.
Yes, we will definitely talk later more.
Perhaps I can take the opportunity. I mean, you will also have a word, but I would like to ask Eva, because I paid attention. I really liked your pieces, and I paid attention that you did use the word aesthetic.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by it? Because I mean, sort of.
Yeah, I know. I didn't want to bring up the definition of aesthetics, but it's a very slippery concept, but I think it's I could make a try to define it, but I think it's more like a strategy, like you open a box, and when you have opened the box, you have aesthetics. And that kind of summarizes the artistic strategy for the project. And when you're dealing with like projects that are complex and pointing and involving an atmosphere, that kind of gives another kind of aspects to aesthetics. If that answers your question.
Well, I mean, just a small follow-up. I mean, you mentioned Arnold Berliat and his notion of engagement. I mean, that certainly clarified for me, at least. I mean, what you mean that people are really engaged with the pieces.
Yeah, I think I was thinking before, like, what about engagement? And I think if you can engage someone who's not at all into art, like a politician who's saying that there is no climate change, then you would have a very successful project in engagement. And I don't know if you can really evaluate that.
Okay, thanks very much. Yep.
Thank you for these wonderful presentations. My question is merging into the previous panel as well with art and science, and I was wondering that if prior to the use of photography, researchers would draw and record things by themselves, by illustrating very detailing and very artistically what they saw, then with the evolvement and development of technology, the aesthetical language and the aesthetics of science have evolved as well very strongly in a different direction as art moved. And perhaps some of you have ideas or comments on that, like where comes the aesthetics of science?
So who wants to start? Eva?
I would say that aesthetics is not a static concept. I think it's very it's following the development of all kinds of cultural engagements, and I think it's applied and used and used in all kind of circumstances. So
when we look specifically the use of visual materials that scientists, researchers produce, they have a very distinct aesthetic of science have a very strong visual language that they use.
Yeah, but they have they have different set of principles they have to follow. It has to be precise. It has to be verifiable. You have to be able to communicate it for your audience. So I think it's the format that the discipline is in that actually make the design. Also, that's part of the aesthetics, I think. Maybe someone else.
I will say very shortly. I think, in some sense, if you think of the history like far away when the photography was not yet there, I mean, everything was drawn in science. And I guess then certain kind of aesthetic, at least the science visualization sort of evolved from that, because there were certain preciseness or maybe. But could be also, I think there were a lot of interpretations, a lot of choices were made on those. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to think to that, and I think that it's not so far from the art, I think, but it's very close. Yeah, the current maybe data aesthetics of charts and measurements. That's a different ground.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Björn Kröger, and I have also a question to Eva. And it was funny, when Arto asked this question, I just had a similar kind of question. You used the word generative in your word instead of creative or production or what else. And I just Googled what generative means, but I somehow thought there might be also a concept behind and a consciousness that you use generative and not other words. And I would be interested in what could this be?
Yeah, I use generative because it's a set of rules. So in the mapping of the data to the sounds. So the sounds happen in real time. So it's an emergent quality, rather than it's just playing sound in what do you call it, a processive way. So it's actually because of the generative rule, it has something emerging by itself.
I find this interesting because I'm paleontologist or biologist basically, and I write about about evolution, and this word never came in my mind because you speak about origin, but origin, it is not, you don't have origins in evolution in that sense. So, and you speak about creation, but it's not a creation. Generative is a much better word for this also. It's because these are emergent properties. When you have a new species or new kinds of organisms, it's a generative process. So it's very, thank you for that, that thought.
Well, it's not a question. I just wanted to add into the strand here of aesthetics and whether we recognize something as science or art. I had a very interesting experience during last article biennial, where we invited artists that was touching upon scientific topics. Some of the artifacts were also using scientific equipment in the exhibition. And the art critic was obviously very confused because her conclusion was, where's the art?
Yeah, I also just want to comment this introduce the randomness in your art, Eva. And I think that's kind of concluding lots of what we have been talking about. The similarities being an artist, being a scientist, and how an idea is developing from the very beginning, and how we try to make it into fruition, to make it real. And everything is about being aware of the randomness, sort of. And it was so fun to see this tree of mountain, this mountain tree, and from the beginning how it was planned and how it was now, and to see the trees, which one was strong, which one was not, and one can say, is that a successful installation, because so much of the installation, or so many of the trees were poor. They were almost lacking the tree figure, and still it's so livable. So it's so interesting when you're talking about this biological diversity and the importance of that, and what we are seeing, the visuality is quite is not successful in a way, and so it's a very interesting piece of art.
Yeah, I totally agree with this kind of drone footage. It's sort of also, I was like looking at it. Why is that plot now? Like, why there seems to be a good growth here, almost nothing. I have a similar experience with this work I didn't talk about, which is the cloned Christmas trees, which is the rotation of the trees. When you put that in a museum or gallery, people are super annoyed if they are not in pristine condition, because that's what you expect when you go to a gallery. Everything needs to be perfect and sort of that kind. But it's biological. Some of them survive, some don't.
I would like to comment on that similarity of art and science, that as I'm working as a researcher and as an artist, and I have some, I don't know if I can say, but some competence in both, then I think they are very similar practices. And I've been surprised even with the collaboration with an engineer that the working methods that we use as researchers and artists, they are very similar. So sometimes we as artists, we think that that we have the certain ways of acting, and nobody else understands what we are doing. But I think it's not true. So if we are just open-minded, and if we do collaboration with researchers from different fields, we can learn something, and we can even say that, yeah, we are doing the same thing. It's not that different. So I think it's very fruitful to do interdisciplinary research and interdisciplinary art too.
For me, as a visual artist, science also is source of inspiration. When I see some results, many times I start to play with the ideas, and I don't know, maybe my artwork or end result is not anymore science, but it's some kind of idea or solution what can come after in future.
Yeah, I want to comment on that too, actually. I'm the cynical now here. I really find it difficult, but I wish the scientists would open up a little bit more and take us in as we are. And like I earlier in the discussion today pointed out that or kind of tried to provoke a little bit discussion on this, that science maybe avoids the complex questions and steers away because it's so disciplinary, single disciplined. What I think also is a tendency in science to do techno fixes instead of actually going in deep into the real problems and looking and tackling, and I think there the artists could be really valuable.
Okay, well that will be the last one.
Okay, sorry for that. Yeah, I would say, and when you mentioned that, I thought one word which did not fall today is power. I think that's the reason why scientists, and I'm one, I work in a museum, and the scientists, they don't want to have artists in the museum because it's about decision making, it's about money, it's about who wants to have the power over the objects, how to place them, how to interpret them, how to get the money and the things like that, and that's better not. No. Museum of Natural History here in Helsinki. So, yeah, okay.
Well, that is a very tricky question. Now we come into sort of real-life political issues. Eva, do you want to brief comment on that?
Yeah, that means that we as artists have to find ways to get into work with the scientists and not the opposite.
It depends. When scientists want to get I think it depends. When a scientist want to get entrance into chiasma, then he is the one who has to seek, but or into the media, or whatever. Yeah, so, or into politics, decision making. So, scientists sometimes have interest in to do science, but not politics. And I think it's often also the same with artists. They want to make their art and not to make politics and sitting in some boring discussions and things like that.
Well, I think our discussion has not been boring, so I want to thank once again all the speakers and also you audience. I mean, great questions. I think it's time to close the session today. I wonder whether Anu has some practical information. Of course. Okay, so.
So I'm really happy to see you all here because it has been a long day and we have so many topics and sessions and everything and really short presentations. So you're wonderful, all of you. And then the practical things. So there is a map for tomorrow when we are going Vartiosaari, and this is the map where you can see where this side. Where are the artworks? We will have the guided tours, but anyhow it might be interesting to have a map for yourself so you can somehow recognize where you are going. And then once again, it was read already, but basically we are tomorrow outside, so take warm clothes and some waterproof and everything, this stuff, and a water bottle. There is a place that you can fill it, but it's a practical thing. And all these presentations, they will be also saved, and you will later on find a link of these presentations. I don't know the schedule, but in future. And yeah, I'm thinking about having a little holiday one day. Yeah. And then we will have a fantastic wine and snack, and it's once again, you can find the information about them from our website, Osuuskunta Juurikas, but it's kind of not easy to remember all this information, and even they have a visit cards, they might get lost. So we have been trying to put all the information there, but if you find mistake, just contact us. But I think they are soon ready. Maybe we don't have so much table, so because this is wine and snack, so maybe you can just jump a little bit, or yeah. But that was everything. And oh, one thing really important. Hansu with the yellow jacket, Ida. No, nyt ska komma svenska. So today. So Hansu is going to be a guide tomorrow. So if you need and you don't want to take the ferry or water bus from Hakaniemi, which is leaving 10 o'clock, and you don't know how to go to Vartiosaari, so you can just go to front of the railway station where the tram lines goes, the main door, and Hans will be there 9:30. And then you will take together the metro and the bus. Yeah, that was all. Okay, thank you.
And also, I was given the privilege to thank you for all your work.